Hello and welcome to this, our very first webinar of the year. And boy, are we kicking off with a strong one. My name is Eoin Maxime. I'm founder and CEO of Tines, and today I'm so pleased to be joined by Kevin Davis from the Tines sales engineering team and Maxime Lamont-Forsard from our great friends at LimaCharlie. Together, we're going to be addressing a thorny topic. That is, why is there so much bullshit involved in the selling of security products? And specifically, why do security vendors make it so difficult for practitioners, the software buyers, to try out their products? We're also going to be putting our money where our mouths are and demonstrating that there is an alternate way, a better way. We're going to show in real time how anyone can combine the free, fully featured versions of Tines and LimaCharlie to build robust end-to-end detection and response automation that's totally BS free. Before that, let's hear from Kevin and Maxime. KD, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, great to meet everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As Owen mentioned, my name is Kevin Davis. I'm one of the sales engineers here at Tines, and I'll be playing Vanna White in the background, walking everyone through the build as Owen and Maxime walk us through and talk through the story today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, KD. Maxime, would you like to introduce yourself and maybe for folks who aren't too familiar with LimaCharlie, share the origin story with us?
Yeah, sure thing. So my name is Maxime, co-founder of LimaCharlie. We've existed in one form or another for a long time. Used to be an open source EDR, and then we've evolved a whole lot into no longer kind of an open sourced project, but we like to say that we're as close to open source as you can have, while also having a vendor that's actually more reliable in that way. We produce security infrastructure as a service. So what that means is we're starting with EDR as the core piece of what we're putting out there. But much like you guys, I think we're kind of part of that new generation of products that realize that, welcome to like the year 2000, where people can self-serve and, use openly available documentation and just, build what they need instead of kind of just getting, relying on the promise of a vendor that this thing is happening in the background.
Awesome. And you know what? That actually brings me really neatly onto how I first found out about LimaCharlie. So a couple of years ago, I was speaking to an investor, not an investor in Tines, but an external investor. And I was explaining why we at Tines provide a free version of our product that literally takes seconds for anyone on the internet to access. And I was frankly complaining how at the time I wasn't aware of any EDR platforms that had a not completely terrible free tier. And the investor said, hey, I got one. And it's coming from a crew outside of Canada called LimaCharlie. And so we obviously have very similar views on this, but why do you think some security vendors, not all, generally make it so hard for people to access their products?
I think it's a historical thing, right? Cybersecurity's been for a long time kind of, pardon the cliche, but in the shadows. And so there's not a lot of transparency in general from security vendors. So I think they've historically just been very cagey about, what they expose to people about what they actually protect against, or what they can detect, how they do things. So it was just kind of a response mechanism to this whole industry being based on the secret sauce kind of concept, right? Which is, it used to be fine, but I think, just like in general purpose IT, that doesn't really fly anymore. People want to know, what it is that's going on.
Yeah, completely agree. And our backgrounds before we kind of founded companies are kind of similar, right? We both spent a bunch of time as security practitioners, myself in companies like eBay and PayPal and DocuSign, and you, I think, were in like Google and CrowdStrike and Chronicle. Do you think our experience as security practitioners has colored our view on how security products should be bought and sold?
Absolutely. I think if for every industry, like anybody starting, a company, having been in the trenches and kind of knowing, how painful a lot of these things are, definitely shapes the way that that you do that. And hopefully you can kind of connect, right, this experience, but also kind of the experience of building a product and building kind of a longer lived company for a lot of different people.
Yeah, it's all about that empathy, I think, that you generate, like you said, when you're in the trenches. And, today, we're primarily going to be focused on accessing products. So accessing free tiers, trying them out by yourselves. But I think other ways that this BS manifests itself as like true opaque pricing. And I was just curious, I'm sorry to put you on the spot here, but out of interest, do you guys have pricing on your website?
Yeah. Oh, we absolutely do. It's on the website. We tell you exactly, how to calculate it. We like to compare a little bit ourselves to like the cloud providers, right? Where if you go on AWS or GCP, you can see exactly what you're going to be paying for and how, and they make it as easy as possible for you to calculate that. And it's not the complex 3-year bundles or anything like that.
Yeah, it's all about that transparency. So again, sorry to put you on the spot here, but what are some other kind of like BS practices that you'd love to see come to an end that security vendors like typically leverage?
I think personally it's there's a lot of opacity in what security vendors will protect you against, right? The MITRE framework has really brought in kind of the underlying tools nowadays for people to go and let's talk about what we protect you against and how we do that, and test against that. This kind of whole DevOps mentality that IT has had needs to really come into cybersecurity and really be baked in, just like it was now baked into ops. So that, people are not, are not deploying a vendor that just, they buy this product because the guy they shook hands with says like, oh, don't worry, we'll stop, anything happening. You're protected. Like,
I love it. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So enough chat. Let's get into this. So there's a ton of people on the call today. And I just want to reemphasize that everything that KD and Maxime are going to do today is being built with our free, publicly available versions of Tines and LimaCharlie. If you want to follow along, please do so. Again, this is all publicly accessible. Maxime, do you want to get us started?
Sure thing. All righty. So we'll just switch to, here we go. A brand new account in LimaCharlie. I skipped the login, the verify your email part, the boring part. So what we're going to do is we'll start by just creating a tenant. So with LimaCharlie, you can decide where you want your tenant to live. So we'll just give it a name and start the creation. So it's going to take a couple seconds. Everything that you do is, like if you're in GCP or AWS is like a project. So this is just setting up your project so that you can do stuff within it. You get 2 free sensors on the free tier of LimaCharlie, and like 99% of things are actually free. So let's do this. So the first step, what we're going to do is we're going to install a sensor. So we're going to, in our case, select a Windows sensor. So we have a ton of different things and a lot more coming very shortly that you can support. But we'll just keep it simple. Everybody's used to Windows. So we'll just say it's just desktops, and we'll want all the desktops to be automatically tagged with desktop. So that's easy. So we will use this installation key. It's going to be a 64-bit box. So we'll just use the 64-bit executable. There we go. And it's giving us the command line. So what I'll do is you can see that we're now waiting for the sensor to connect. You don't have to go through this whole, web page. You could do that offline. It's just a nicety to help you along. So what we will do is we'll just paste the clipboard. Sorry, I'm using a cloud virtual machine here, and the clipboard feature takes forever. So it's just going to take a couple of seconds to go through.
Hey, at least it doesn't have any typos. If you were typing that out manually, you'd be sure to you'd first spend like half an hour deleting and retyping.
That's right. Hold on.
So how many, out of interest, Maxime, how many platforms are you guys currently supporting?
You know what? I don't even know the count, but we have Windows, Mac, Linux. It's the same agent, so it's not like totally different thing. 5 years later, we realize that Linux is a thing. Like it's same agent. We support Chrome and Chrome OS, Edge. We also have a SASE product, so you can put your phone essentially on roughly like a VPN, but a smart VPN. You can have your own policies enforced in the cloud, do PCAP in the cloud. So a whole bunch of that. And then very, very shortly, we're bringing in the rest of the world into this. So, GCP audit logs, cloud trails, carbon black sensors. We're going to be supporting 1Password logs, just everything else is going to be just brought in. Yeah. Cool. So we'll just push enter. There we go. That's done. So that's installed. So we will just switch here and it should refresh within a second. Here we go. We have our first sensor. So, all right. So with the first sensor, it's in, we can get, basic details, but we can take a more of a look a little bit later about that. So the first thing that we're going to do is we will enable the Sigma add-on. The Sigma add-on, I'll just get that going. It takes a few seconds. So Sigma, if you don't know about Sigma, it's an open source project that aims at kind of taking generic rules and converting them for a whole bunch of different security platforms. We have built our own, converter to have a bunch of converters in there. So we've contributed our own to this. And that means that for pretty much every single Sigma rules, you can generate a LimaCharlie rule. And what we do is we make it really easy in LimaCharlie. So you can go and you can one click say, you know what, I want to apply to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rules to my tenant without having to, manage them or like do anything like that. It's automatically updated all the time. The community generates all those hundreds of rules as part of that project. So this is a quick way to get up and going.
Nice.
Cool. So we've enabled that. So that way we can start, getting some detections. And what I will need is to create an API key, right? If we very briefly describe what we're doing, is we're going to have this sensor, this EDR in LimaCharlie, going to generate things. It will also generate so detections. We're going to detect things off of that. So we'll want to be sending the data into Tines over a webhook. And then we're going to do all that automation into Tines. And as a response, to do something about it, what we're going to do is we're going to create an API key. So I'll go and I'll just say, okay, create an API key. I'm going to keep it simple, enable everything. Key missing name. So I'll just enable this. So I'll just call it Tines create. There we go. So now I have my API key. And what we're going to do next is, pardon me, I'm just referring back to my notes, make sure I don't forget anything. So we've got the API key that'll allow to go back to us. And now we will create an output for detections to go to Tines.
So what we're doing here is essentially, we've got a sensor installed on an endpoint. That sensor is collecting a bunch of really interesting security related telemetry and logs and so on. And we have a set of rules that are sourced from Sigma that are essentially going to inspect those logs and say, hey, if any of these rules fire, we're now going to send the details of that alert to whatever configuration you define here.
That's exactly right. So those rules get applied in real time at wire speed, like of the telemetry coming in, and we can show you a little bit after what the telemetry looks like. And one of the other, big superpowers, as I talk about outputs, it's like forwarders or something like that in other platforms. It's our ability to go and say, okay, we have a bunch of different types of data into LimaCharlie. But in this case, I want to take like the detections and I want to send them somewhere else. So with LimaCharlie, from the, any types of sensors that your logs that you bring in, you'll have this ability to go and really go, narrowly say, what, I want this, and that to go to, my Splunk instance, and the rest to go to an S3 bucket. So you can, in general, you can optimize, your kind of pipeline as a security organization, but you can also optimize your cost a whole lot, which is really nice, because now you don't have to, send the kitchen sink over to Splunk and pay through the nose. You might be able to just be in the Splunk free instance. Who knows? Maybe next time that'll be part of our demo. So in this case, what we want to go is we're going to just say, okay, we're going to send the webhook. And so we will call this webhook. And I'll skip a little bit over some of this data because I think we'll be covering it kind of on your side. But you can kind of really customize all the details of what you want, and just point wherever you want your webhook to go.
Awesome stuff. So by my watch, that was about 5 minutes. And so in 5 minutes, we've essentially gone from like 0 to having a fairly robust detection and alerting mechanism. Now what we're going to do is we're going to see what's possible when you take that data and throw some automation around it. So KD, do you want to take us through these next few steps?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing that I'll need to do is go into Tines, log in. I have a community edition account that I use for myself and for all demo purposes. So the first thing I'll need to do to make sure I can make successful connections to LimaCharlie is set up my credential. So I'll go into my team here. For everyone that's signing up and follow along, yours will be your first team. So you want to go ahead and select your credentials. From here, we can go ahead and click new credential, and we'll just give this a name of LimaCharlie. And I'll choose a specific text or a type. So Tines does support multiple types. So JOT, OAuth, AWS, HTTP request, and mutual TLS. For this particular example, I'll use the HTTP request action. And then from here, I'll want to input the LimaCharlie URL. It's going to be HTTPS app dot LimaCharlie.io/JWT. And the method's going to be get. Content type is going to be, I'm going to get rid of that. And I'll go ahead and add in a new field. I'll call this payload. And then in here, I'm going to add in another bracket. This is going to be my organization ID.
And this is the ID that was just provided to us as Maxime was creating his tenant.
Exactly. So we'll add that in there, and then we'll add in another field for our API key. And this is going to be defined as secret. And this is the one that Maxime had created earlier. So I'll go ahead and add that in here. All right, so those look good. So as part of this process, Tines enables you to go ahead and run a sample to make sure that, one, you're making a successful request like we have here, but also to basically obfuscate this from the UI and make it more manageable. So that way, anybody that's working with LimaCharlie within Tines can go ahead and capture this bearer token each time it gets generated. So the way I'll define this is going to be my credential name, which is LimaCharlie.body.jwt, because that's where the bearer token resides. Now, once I have that here, you can follow this JSON path of LimaCharlie.body.jwt. And when I go to everyone, then I'll be able to share this out for anybody that's working within my Tines account versus only people that are in my Boston sales engineering team.
And just to add some color on what's super cool about those HTTP request credentials is essentially every time you embed that credential in another action. So no matter where it is, what's going to happen is that action is going to run. Tines is going to recognize that you've defined that HTTP request, and in the background, make that request and get a fresh jot. And so Tines, as the builder, you don't have to know what's actually happening to get your authentication. All you need to know is that this is the credential that needs to be ran.
Exactly.
Beautiful.
Awesome. So now that I have my LimaCharlie HTTP request credentials set up, now I want to go ahead and build a story. So I'll go ahead into the stories, click new story, and we'll give this a name of No BS Security Webinar. Keep my events for 7 days, but I do have the ability to select longer or shorter should I need to. And if I needed to provide a description, I could also do that. And then one of the last steps on Maxime's side for LimaCharlie is a webhook. Go ahead and paste this over here. And I'll go ahead and allow verbs. And if I wanted to customize my path or my secret, I have the ability to do that too. So if I want to make this path specific to the app I'm working with, I can go ahead and define that. For now, because I already have one generated, I'll just keep it as is. And Maxime, I'll send this over to you now.
And while you're doing that, Katie, I'll just talk a little bit about what you get in the free version of Tines. And so what KD is building here is what we call an automation story, essentially one of your workflows. So for Tines, it's really common for our customers to have automation stories for phishing response, EDR alerts, employee onboarding, et cetera, et cetera. The free version of Tines, the community edition as we call it, contains 3 published stories. And a published story is essentially a story that is running in production that allows you to create a schedule, run in the background, et cetera, et cetera. And so essentially you can create 3 automated workflows absolutely for free without any constraints whatsoever. Back to you, Katie.
Awesome. Yeah, and one call out too, before we actually start building within the story, you'll notice that the way that we approach automation is very different and unique. The way that we do it is based off of these 7 atomic actions in the top left-hand corner. So webhook is a great way, obviously, to get events in. Another, for some of our additional use cases are IMAP for your phishing response stories and HTTP request actions if you want to run gets or continuously pull an application. These 3 actions here are going to be the way that you ingest and trigger a story within Tines. For today's purposes, we'll use the webhook action. And then for any specific templates that you're looking for, instead of working with a generic HTTP request action, you'll see this a lot today. We have over 200 vendors, 2,500 public templates available. So if I wanted to go ahead and isolate a sensor in LimaCharlie, which we'll be doing closer to the end, simply drag that on. The request is already formatted for you at a minimum to make a successful request. And then the only thing our users ever have to worry about is defining that JSON path, which we'll get into as we start to build out. So since we've added our webhook, we have a couple of events that have come in based off of the sensor that Maxime had set up. So if I drill into this here, we can start to see all of the body information from the payload, all of our headers, response. So if I wanted to use any of this information as I'm building within Tines, I can always reference exactly what that looks like and try to identify what I'm trying to do with the information that's coming in. And for this particular workflow, I want to build out 3 ways that I can identify the specific severity level of the sensor event that's coming in. So we'll work with one of those actions, which is the trigger action, to identify our levels of low, medium, and high. So to do that, and you'll start to see some kind of familiarity and similar steps, we're going to go ahead and drag our trigger action onto the storyboard. And here's where we can start to define different rules. We can have 1 or many rules, and then we always have the ability to select our option down in the bottom to add additional fields and descriptors should we need to. For this one, I'm just going to keep it very simple and just define it as sensor level low. And then I'll have the ability to select my different types. So if I wanted to analyze text that's in or not in a specific email, do comparisons on integers. And in this particular case, I'll use my type as regex to parse for that low value. And then I'll need to go ahead and define the JSON path for where that actually resides. So the way I'll do that is take the arrow that gets generated when I hover over my webhook, tie it up to my sensor level low trigger action, and then I'll start to define my JSON path. And there's two ways you can do that. You can click this little plus cursor that's available to you, or you could do 2 curly brackets and then select your value. From here, we'll have the upstream action that we're connected to, which is this LimaCharlie sensor events webhook. And if I need to reference any credentials, resources, story information, meta information on my Tines tenant, I could do that. And then further on down, if you're looking to do comparisons or use any of the liquid syntax that we have for some more complex potential use cases, you do have that available to you. But for now, I'll just select my LimaCharlie sensor events, and I'll drill directly into the body, and I'll go into detect MTD. And then in here, I'll be able to find that level. And then once I get that, we'll have a little kind of results available to us down at the bottom where we can see the specific result we're looking for. So here we have one that's of high. Do a command enter. And now I'll have that JSON path available to me. Now, if I wanted to test as I'm building, I have the ability to do that as well. I can go ahead and select dry run, select any of the action or events that have been received from the webhook action itself. If I wanted to modify any of the payload, I can load this directly in an editor, or I can go ahead and select dry run. And then based off of that, I'll be given a sample readout as to whether or not that rule matched. If it did match, the specific value, and then the ultimate result we're looking for, which is a true match. So for here, for the sake of time, I'll just go ahead and do a simple Command C, Command V on my sensor level low trigger action. And I'll just simply modify the value that I'm analyzing, which is going to be medium. And I'll update my sensor name. I'm going to do the same thing here as well. This one's going to be, oh, that one's already medium. Drag that, and then we'll do our high as well. Now that I have these 3 trigger actions available, again, if I wanted to test this, select my event that has that value in there, and then I can ensure that I'm getting the proper results and feedback that I expect as I'm building this story.
And so what's going to happen here, KD, is essentially LimaCharlie is going to trigger based on some detection that will contain a severity level. And because you've defined 3 separate trigger actions, only one of them will fire based on high, medium, or low. And
Exactly.
then you can kind of begin to define different sets of response based on the severity, because only ever one of those actions is going to fire.
Exactly. Yeah. So in our case, maybe we have, some specific processes already defined. Maybe we don't. And that's really the beauty of Tines is you have this blank storyboard where you can essentially whiteboard out and framework the potential scenarios that you want. So for me, I always know that I want to create a Jira issue. So if I use my filter over here, I'll select Atlassian. I'll drag and drop over my create issue in Jira. And I'm going to have that right now just for the sensor level of low. And again, same process. I'll connect up my trigger action here, ensure that I have the proper resource defined, which I do. And then further on down again, because we already format the requests at a minimum to make successful calls for you, we'll just need to make sure we have, again, those credentials set up correctly. So I'll select my Jira demo and then my resource, make sure that that is correct, which it is. And then in here, I can customize any of this additional information. So I want to change my key to be demo. And then for now, I'm just going to use some of the payload information from that request just to see how it's formatted. So I'll go ahead and do 2 curly brackets, select my value, choose the LimaCharlie webhook action, drill into the body, and then from here, I'll just use cat as our summary name.
And what's great about this, which we shouldn't overlook, is the fact that even though that HTTP request action that's to create a ticket isn't directly connected to the webhook action, it still has access to the information that it generated, right? Because it's downstream from that action, you have the ability to access all the data from all those actions. And so the more actions you have, the more context you have, the more high fidelity decisions you can make, and the more information you can include in your ticket to make an analyst's life easier.
Exactly. Now for this one here, instead of going and selecting dry run, what I'll do is I'll select my first event that came into the LimaCharlie webhook. And what I'll do is Reemit. And Reemit is essentially running the event that was received again from that point in time from the action that you select. So there is no action here or event that was received in this trigger action. So I don't have the ability to emit anything. But if I go into my LimaCharlie webhook, click Reemit, we should start to see different action events populate on the tiles themselves. So here again, we have this successful request. If I go into my event, I can click into this and I can see exactly what that new demo key is. And as I build this, I can see how this is going to be starting to format for me directly in Jira. So great. We have our non-interactive PowerShell, and we captured that, as Owen had mentioned, directly from the LimaCharlie sensor event webhook, and just reference that specific action, the body, the cat, and here we have that specific value that's now a part of our ticket directly in Jira. So good starting point here, but maybe there's some more descriptive information that I can go ahead and add in. So I do have the ability to essentially format my tickets however I do today in Jira, or if I want to start a brand new process and format things. A lot of our customers tend to utilize data tables. So if I go ahead here and do just a simple header 2, alert overview, and then I'll start with 2 pipes, and then I'll give this a name of level. And then at that point, I'll reference that specific value that I'm looking for, which is going to be LimaCharlie body. So it's going to be detect, and it's going to be detect MTD.
And while you're doing that, I'll point out that yes, we're using Jira in this case, but similar to how LimaCharlie supports so many different platforms, there's nothing within Tines that says you're just limited to using Jira for case management, right? You could be using GitHub issues, you could be using a Google spreadsheet. I think that's the beauty of being kind of like a vendor agnostic, independent platform, is that you don't play favorites, right? We just work with everything.
Exactly. Yep. Great call out. And now for this here, I've just gone ahead and added in a bunch more fields and values. So our process name, our provider name, namespace, log ID, and system time. So now that I have all of this available to me, this is great. I'll go ahead and I'll re-emit this event one last time, and we'll see the new structure of our Jira ticket based off that, those new values that we've added in and the data table here. It looks like we have some information populating, and now I have some structure to how my analysts or frontline users are going to be responding to and working to these sensor events coming from LimaCharlie, regardless of the tool of choice that they're comfortable with. Again, whether it's Jira, ServiceNow, Zendesk, and as we start to build out further, we'll add in Slack for some notifications, more specifically to our high-value alerts that are being generated.
Awesome. That's really, really cool. That story is looking super nice, Katie. Maxime, what are you seeing on your end?
Yeah, I mean, everything's just working great on our end. The detections are just flowing. So yeah, things are good.
Very cool. Very cool. So KD, what's our next step?
So here I'm going to add in one additional step, and this is going to be to identify if a hash is a part of this low-level alert. Then I want to go ahead and check third-party tool VirusTotal to pull that in. So I'm going to have 2 trigger actions. One, if the field matches null, then I'll just capture that there, and I'll add in just a comment in Jira. But for this one specifically, I'm going to try to capture a hash directly from the LimaCharlie sensor and do some additional enrichment from VirusTotal, and then add that directly into my Jira ticket.
Nice.
Just to provide more context for the users if they need it. So I'll customize this regex here. And then again, I'm going to drill into my specific fields that I'm looking for. And I should tie this up. Now I can pull in LimaCharlie, body, detect, event, and hash. Great. So we do have a hash here, which is awesome. And then I'll use one of my templates. Search file hash. again, by the nature of Tines, I don't have to worry about where that hash lives, because as I start to build, I can reference any of those upstream actions. So we're just going to walk that specific tree again. It's going to be detect MTD, detect event, and grab our hash information. Make sure that we have the appropriate credentials set up, which we do. Awesome. So now that I have this process here, we'll go through and we'll test that event and see what information we get back from VirusTotal now. And looks like we have a lot of information from VirusTotal, all the attributes. So again, good ways to ensure, double check, and see what other information is out there for you to compare against the different tools that you have within your stack. And all this information can be utilized to make decisions, escalate, close, whatever the process is within your organization. But the fact that you can, within a few minutes, start to receive events, identify the specific severity levels that you want to work with, and do enrichment, pretty powerful for what we're doing so far directly in Tines. So now I want to go ahead and add this directly back into Jira. So I'll capture that issue comment in Atlassian, and I'm going to go ahead and drag that on. And again, we already have a Jira ticket that was created, so I can just reference that key from my create Jira issue. And that's going to be .body.key. Again, we have that specific result letting us know that we've selected the appropriate field in the JSON path. And then the last part, we'll update our credential again, and then we'll start to customize this field with all the information that we're looking for. And we'll add in just a few pieces of information. So we'll do process hash. This is going to be LimaCharlie events.body detect event hash. And we'll close our pipe. And same process here. And we're going to go through and get some of the information directly from VirusTotal. So we'll get our signature info. Search.
What I love about what you're doing here, KD, is that there's some pretty gnarly things going on here, right? We're dealing with like webhooks from external systems. We're dealing with like a number of different decision trees. We're dealing with a number of different services. But you're not writing a single line of code here, right? There's no HTTP client codes. There's no like timeout code. There's no external libraries. This is just these 7 action types. And anyone on the call can see how simple this is, right? You're just clicking and typing. That's it.
Yep. It's a good thing we're not writing code, because we'd be here forever too. Awesome. So now I have a structure to my comment from Jira. So again, I'm going to go ahead and I will take this information and I'll just dry run it against that VirusTotal event. And again, we have that successful request. Perfect. So now we have some information that now resides directly in this process here. And I'll just go ahead and add in a few others real quick. We have a data table structure being added to our comments directly in Jira, and some more information that we can work with. So now for the very first time, as if this was being generated, we'll run this through. We'll go into our new ticket and we'll see how we're working with that information that's coming in from the alert sensor in LimaCharlie, and then some information directly from VirusTotal. So we know that the signature info on this one has Trojan activity. So we know that to be potentially malicious. And now we have at least some structure that we're working with directly in our Jira ticket, just on low. So now we can start to build out and work with some of our medium and high severity ones. Do you guys think it'd be worthwhile to dive more into the high or the medium? Because the medium, I feel like we can just add in some additional logic to provide prompts, which we're going to also do with the high.
Let's go straight to high, Katie. Let's cut out medium and go straight to the good stuff.
Sounds good. All right. So if we go into Slack, so for any of our high value alerts that are coming in, we want to get specific notifications. So I'm going to go ahead and post a message to my Slack channel. And for this one, I'm going to utilize my Slack webhook. So this time I will be calling a credential. Slack webhook. And now I have the ability to send messages there. We'll test that out real quick. Perfect. So now I have a message populating into Slack. But we want to do something very specific with this. So I'm going to add in some of the blocks that Slack allows via their API, and then go ahead and start to provide a lot of the information that we want to work with when those high value alerts come through. So if I wanted to use, say, I think it's a rich notification. Perfect. We have all of this information in here that we can work with. So I'm going to go ahead and do a change mode to plain code, copy this here, and then I'll go into plain code for my post message to Slack, add all of that information directly into that, and I can go back to my builder, remove this action. If I remove it inadvertently or too quickly, I do always have the ability to go back and undo that. So quick time saver there. And then I don't actually need a channel because I have one defined, but I will go ahead and add in a specific section, and we'll call this text. And in the text, we're going to add, look at that, I've already messed it up.
While you're fixing that, I'll explain that. Yeah, we're using Slack here because we think that's a fun way to do it. But again, you get to define your own process in Tines. So if you're a LimaCharlie customer and a PagerDuty customer, you could alert straight to PagerDuty rather than going to Slack. You could just like create a ticket in Jira if you wanted. You could send an email. That's the power of this platform, is that you have complete control over how you want to do it. We're pretty opinionated about being in Tines, about being unopinionated about how people use the tool. So we snap directly to the processes that you want to do.
And I think part of the power as well as a user, that's kind of building these types of things is not only, the power in what you have at the end of the day, but also having the ability to just change it on the spot without having to go and, connect back to all your logging servers and implementing config changes and really heavy stuff. It's always just on the tip of the needle where you can just adjust it the way you need it.
Totally.
All right, now that I have the right structure, we can go ahead and we can start to enrich all of this information. So I can go ahead and again, reference those LimaCharlie events that are coming in, take a look at some of the information that's provided to me. And then more importantly, down here, for the information that we're providing, we also want to provide our users the ability to take action and review and understand what's going on. So that way they have the ability to interact with these types of events that are occurring. And for that, we utilize either Slack or Microsoft Teams and a lot of the functionality that they provide to provide those different text blocks for the users to take actions. One way we do that is through the widgets of prompts. So here in this particular prompt, all I'm doing is looking for the specific verb of yes and no, but I do have the ability to customize what those buttons look like. So in this particular case, I'm going to utilize isolate for my prompt yes, and then do not isolate for my prompt of no. So now that I have those defined, let's see what our event message will look like once we hit Slack. And I believe I used this one prior. Oh, that was our low. So we'll go to our high one over here. Awesome. And now we have an event coming through. So now we have something that looks just like this, very descriptive, immediately calling out what the type of alert is from the sensor, the level, the computer, the host name, and the external IP, some of our tagged information, and then a specific message to the user that's responding. Do you want to isolate this sensor? Yes or no is what we're referencing in the background. But for the purposes of the user responding, it'll be isolate or do not isolate. So based off of that action, I could say do not isolate, or I could go back in and say isolate. And then with that, you'll receive this splash screen here, letting you know that Tines has received the prompt that you've selected. And now we can take actions based off of that response directly in Tines. So for this one here,
that prompt capability can be used elsewhere outside Slack, like you were saying, Kitty. You can put that in a Microsoft Teams message. You can put it in a PagerDuty notification. You can put it in a text message. It's just a way of automating response collection on the platforms that your teams are already living in.
Exactly. And for that, it could also be Jira in this particular case with some of the low. And if we wanted to do, medium as well, we can add that directly in here. And then for the sake of this, we would just add that prompt directly in the description section. And then at that point, we can start to allow users working out of Jira for medium severity sensor alerts that are coming in to take that action should they need to, not have to worry about getting a Slack notification just for the high severity ones. So for this case here, because we are getting a high level alert, I'm going to go ahead and build out my 2 different trigger actions. And we'll say isolate and not isolate. And for here, because I know from my Slack notifications, the way that I configured it in the prompt setup, it's going to be yes or no for the prompt response we're looking for. So in here, I'll say yes. And then again, I just need to define that path for the Slack message itself. So we'll do post .prompt, and we'll do status. And once I select that, again, you'll have that little result identifier down in the bottom right. So we know we're getting the correct result. And then for this one, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to isolate that LimaCharlie sensor.
Nice.
And here, again, we already have that credential defined, so we don't need to recreate that, generate a bearer token, then copy and paste that in here. That's going to do that through that HTTP request action that we've generated. So now we just need to dive into that actual sensor that was generated for us. So if I go and click show, and take a look in routing. So we have our SID here, which is 2E6. So I can go ahead and go into body.routing.sid, and I'll pass that through in this request action here. Value, and we're going to go into LimaCharlie.body routing.sid. Nothing else that resides under that. We should be good now. And if I have a high alert that gets generated now from LimaCharlie, that'll again come in via the webhook based on the trigger actions that we've configured. It'll follow that path. Here, I just received a Slack notification. So we have a new one. Do I want to isolate? I'll go ahead and select isolate. And now I should have successful request out to LimaCharlie to isolate that sensor. And before I hand it back over to Maxime, take a look at the information that's provided to us. We have a successful 200. So we should have now isolated that sensor directly in LimaCharlie.
All right, Maxime, let's see. Let's test the KD's handiwork out here.
There we go. So if I go into my sensor status, I can see isolated. We'll forgo the brute force of just switching back to the VM and trying to access the web. But I think the beauty of what actually will happen here is it's isolated from the local network, but from the network, but not the LimaCharlie cloud. So that means that I have my sensor here. That means with that detection, I can actually go in, take a look at all of the telemetry, that's been going on. So there's a lot of things that have been happening. Look at, just do the investigation of that specific event. I can kind of crawl around the graph, look at everything. If I need to, I can also go interactive against that specific endpoint. So, we have a basic console where you could go and, just get like the sensor information, what about that system. But I could also go and, browse the file system as I need, even though it's isolated from the network, it's not isolated from us. We'll have also things like the network and process, which might takes a little bit longer to load the first time, just because there's a lot of hashing that needs to be done, and signature verification. But I'll be able to go and really, do my, there we go. I just reloaded at the wrong time. Go and look into details at what's going on, do your whole investigation. And then at the end of the day, if, you go and you think like, yeah, everything's okay, I can just go and, click to rejoin the network. And here we go. We're back as we were before.
I love it. And what's amazing about that is, let's say, for example, you wanted more context before you isolated the machine, right? What you could do is you could actually talk back to LimaCharlie and say, okay, it's a high priority alert, but tell me what recent network connections there's been. So you can isolate, collect all that context and have it in the ticket. And that's the beautiful thing about like automation and combining these tools together, is that you can do the steps that are super time critical in an automated fashion, and then really take your time with the investigation, collect the information that you need before you draw a line on it.
Absolutely. And you're not limited to, I think also what's really nice is that you're not limited to what your vendor thinks that you should be looking for during an investigation, right? You can decide what you want. If you want it to be as simple as you want, that's fine. If you want to go and say, do a full memory dump anytime a box is isolated automatically and kind of do all that process, you're absolutely free to do it too.
Beautiful. Okay, so let's quickly recap, because we're getting a time here. Because this is pretty incredible, right? So using the free version of Tines, the free version of LimaCharlie, in a matter of minutes, we created an end-to-end security workflow that would frankly add value to pretty much any organization on the planet. We didn't install any software. We didn't have to sign our lives away to get access to these products. We didn't have to contact sales for a demo. We didn't have to give our credit cards. We didn't pay a cent, which is, in my mind, incredible, but also the way it should be. And just to summarize, I want to leave everybody on the call today with a bit of a call to action. If you're a security software buyer, please demand more from your security vendors. Ask them why their pricing isn't on their website. Ask them why you need to do a POC to get access to the product. And similarly, if you're a security vendor, put your pricing on your website. Allow anyone, anywhere, at any time to try the platform that you're selling. Together, we can genuinely make buying, selling, and using security products a more transparent, enjoyable, flexible, BS-free experience. So thank you, KD. Thank you, Maxime. Until next time, talk to you guys later.